Pleased to hear that.
Florida, not from Florida.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Friends of St. Mary's Poetry and Puddings Virtual Edition for 2021. There's a few rules of the game here. I'm hosting this event with Dave Broughton. I'd like to invite our president, our vicar, Andrew McKerney, to make a very welcome announcement. Andrew.
Thank you, Susan. Two announcements, actually, both of which are lovely. The first one, and the most important one possibly, is that exactly a week ago, we were awarded the highest award by Oxford Preservation Trust for the conservation work that we did on the West Front and South Door back in 2017. We were in fact shortlisted for the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings John Betjeman Award in 2018, but only shortlisted and never got that award. So it's a wonderful sense of achievement, finally in 2020, to have got that highest award from Oxford Preservation Trust. And you'll also recall that the Friends made a significant contribution to paying for that conservation work. So thank you very much indeed, and what a wonderful achievement. We're going to be given a plaque. And of course, we thought that the only place we could possibly do it was screw it to the West Front, is probably the most obvious place to do it, as a sort of significant place. Don't you think that would be a good place to put it, everybody? The second rather lovely coincidence is that this morning we installed George Locke's bench. Bill Locke and myself and the man who came from the Memorial Bench Company installed his bench in the churchyard. So do please go round the far side of the churchyard on the south side and go and sit on George's bench and remember him, because he was the founder of Poetry and Puddings, I think, back in 2007, just after I arrived in the parish. So that's a very happy coincidence as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. That's great news. I think anyone sitting on George's bench ought to be reading a poem.
There's a little section of a poem on the bench as part of the engraving.
Fantastic. Oh, yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Not at all.
Okay, we will start our readings then. And the first section of this evening is going to be full of poems that help us think about spring, as we're all noticing the first signs of early spring throughout Italy at the moment. We've got a little bit of a focus on Meadow Lane, but thinking really about the coming season of spring in Meadow Lane and elsewhere. And we're going to start with our wonderful secretary of the Friends of St. Mary's, Fran Deacon, who has many talents, as you will all know. She's a great quizmaster. She's very funny, and she is also a very great poet. And Fran is going to start with a reading of her poem, The Seasons, Meadow Lane, Iffley. Over to you, Fran. You'll need to unmute yourself.
I'll start off with this poem called The Seasons, Meadow Lane, Iffley. Summer's taken hold, and in the torpor of the afternoon, body dew pricking on skin, half anaesthetised to the world, I glimpse with white-hot vision a watchful hawk above the sparking treetops under a stifling sun. Here's autumn, and in the moonlight-shadowed lane, foxes spar on sodden yellow leaves, amidst the musty smell of decay, close by the blackberry thicket, bare, skeletal, lifeless in time, awaiting renewal. Bitter, muffled winter, the grey, white and blue days of scurrying home for shelter, then blank nights of silence, but for the breakneck rattle of distant trains as they hurtle through the frigid air, remote, reassuring. Spring fever. Morning buds glisten in the thicket as the shrill midnight owl takes rest. Milder days, afternoon voices in the lane once more, and from the river, youthful shouts of races won.
Thank you so much, Fran. Such a lovely poem. That really
Thank you.
good. I'm now going to invite Julia Smith to read two poems, one by Philip Larkin, Coming, and the second by John Clare, Spring. Julia.
Thank you. Well, I'm chosen two short poems which are both about the fugitive quality of spring, the feeling that we all know that we can see the signs that spring is coming, and the fleeting signs make us feel hopeful, but we're never quite sure at what point we can say spring's here. The two poems were written over 100 years apart. The first by the 20th century poet Philip Larkin. He's not someone who readily comes to mind, either as a nature poet or as a poet of optimism. So I was attracted to the poem by the thought that the coming of spring can bring joy when it's not looked for and in spite of ourselves. And the second poem by the 19th century poet John Clare, he by contrast was a very fine nature poet, a sensitive and minute observer of the changing seasons. And this poem too is the sign of hope in unlikely places. When Clare wrote it in the early 1840s, he was losing his sense of identity and had been committed to Northampton County Lunatic Asylum. So Philip Larkin, Coming. On longer evenings, light, chill and yellow bathes the serene foreheads of houses. A thrush sings, laurel surrounded, in the deep bare garden, its fresh peeled voice astonishing the brickwork. It will be spring soon. It will be spring soon. And I, whose childhood is a forgotten boredom, feel like a child who comes on a scene of adult reconciling and can understand nothing but the unusual laughter and starts to be happy. And John Clare, Spring. Pale sunbeams gleam that nurture a few flowers, pilewort and daisy, and a sprig of green on whitethorn bushes in the leaf-strewn hedge. These harbingers tell spring is coming fast, and these the schoolboy marks, and wastes an hour from school against the old pasture hedge, cropping the daisy and the pilewort flowers. Pleased with the spring and all he looks upon, he opes his spelling book and hides her blossoms there. Shadows fall, dark like black in the pale sun, and lie the bleak day long like black stock under hedges and bare wind-rocked trees. 'Tis chill but pleasant. In the hedge bottom, lined with brown sere leaves the last year littered there and left, mopes the hedge sparrow with trembling wings and cheats its welcome to pale sunbeams. creeping through and further on, made of green moss, the nest and green blue eggs are seen, all token spring. And every day, green and more green, hedges and close and everywhere appears. Still, 'tis but March, but still that March is spring.
Thank you so much, Julia, for what a well-timed poem for the 2nd of March. Both poems, I think, very, very much of the moment. Thank you. Our next reader is Hilary Pearson, who's just joined the Friends of St Mary's Committee, representing the parish parochial church council. So Hilary is going to read a poem by Gerald Manley Hopkins on spring.
I should say this is my 2nd time on the committee. Spring by Gerald Manley Hopkins. Gerald Manley Hopkins has been my favourite poet since I studied him for A-level. He was born in 1844 in Stratford in East London and came up to Balliol in 1863 to read classics. While he was at Oxford, he became a Roman Catholic and then became a Jesuit. Perhaps the happiest time in his life, a lot of his life was not happy, was when he was studying as a Jesuit at St Bino's in Wales. And this is one of the poems from that time. Nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeds in wheels shoot long and lovely and lush. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens, and thrush through the echoing timber does so rinse and ring the ear, it strikes like lightnings to hear him sing. The glassy pear tree leaves and blooms, they brush the descending blue. That blue is all in a rush with richness. The racing lambs too have fair their fling. What is all this juice and all this joy? A strain of the earth's sweet being in the beginning in Eden garden. Have, yet, before it cloy, before it cloud, Christ Lord, and sour with sinning, innocent mind, and May Day in girl and boy, most, O maid's child, thy choice and worthy the winning.
Thank you so much, Hilary. Wonderful poem. We're going to move on to a different vision of spring, to be a poem to be read by Patty McCarthy, by a poem by Trudy Howson. Patty.
I'm reading a poem called It's Spring by Trudy Howson. And February and March are LGBTQ history months, and Trudy was the LGBT Poet Laureate during 2016. So LGBTQ, as I'm sure many of you know, stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, and queer or questioning. And people in the LGBTQ community support each other in a range of ways, including what's known as coming out, which basically means being open about your sexuality. So I really like the way that the poet refers to spring as coming out and suggests that old ways need to be shaken off to make room for new shoots. So I hope you enjoy this poem. I love it. So, wake up from winter slumber, that slothful cozy lie abed. Hear that persistent shout. It's spring, it's coming out. The days are stretching, yawning, expanding in the warming air. There's a feeling of expectancy. It's spring, it's nearly there. Feeling impatient? A troublesome tickle? A turning up of the senses with frisky on high. It's spring, it's nigh. Buds are joyfully bursting. Leaves spring from somnolent bough. Bulbs are thrusting upwards. It's spring, it's coming now. Sit up and out and look about. It's mix and match and mate. Succumb and follow nature's cue. Spring doesn't hesitate. Every creature's getting lively. Birds are preening, singing, dancing. Bees are buzzing and romancing. Spring is playful, spring is prancing. Now's the time to rise and shine. Don your glad rags, bad shoes, big smile. Strut your stuff, be spontaneous, 'cause spring has style.
Thank you so much, Patty. That's such a great poem.
It's fun, isn't it?
It is. It just has it all, really. I think it's super. Thank you. I'm actually going to read next a poem by Robert Louis Stevenson called Spring Carol. I've no idea when he wrote it because it's one of about 140 poems that were collected a long time after Stevenson died and were published in 1918 in a volume called New Poems. And I found today that this poem, which struck me as being all about the sounds of spring, has actually been set to music by the American choral composer Michael John Trotter. I'm going to spare you the piano and the sound of me singing it, which I think would not be a good idea. And I'll read it, but I hope you'll get some sense of the sounds of spring from this poem, Spring Carol by Robert Louis Stevenson. When loud by landside streamlets gush, and clear in the greenwood choirs the thrush, with sun on the meadows and songs in the shadows, comes again to me the gift of the tongues of the lea, the gift of the tongues of meadows. Straightway my olden heart returns and dances with the dancing burns. It sings with the sparrows to the rain and the grimy barrows. Sings my heart aloud to the silver-bellied cloud, to the silver rainy arrows. It bears the song of the skylark down, and it hears the singing of the town, and youth on the highways and lovers in byways follows and sees, and hearkens the song of the leas, and sings the songs of the highways. So when the earth is alive with gods, and the lusty ploughman breaks the sod, and the grass sings in the meadows, and the flowers smile in the shadows, sits my heart at ease, hearing the song of the leaves, singing the songs of the meadows. I should say that poem also reminds me for some reason of Meadow Lane. I've no idea where Stevenson was when he wrote it, but it does have a whiff of Meadow Lane about it. And that brings us to the end of our first section of poems about spring. We're going to move next to hearing about people in time. And before we do so, I'd like to ask you to turn off your video if you're not actually reading a poem, just to save bandwidth, so we get a better recording. I'd be very grateful for that. Thank you very much. We're going to start this second section by taking a moment to remember our dear friend, David Julia, who died recently. And at David's funeral was read the most wonderful sonnet by William Shakespeare. It's sonnet number 60, and it's going to be read for us this evening by Peggy Seeger.
First of all, I'd like to Give my sympathies to Alison. I know you're here. I'm not sure what relation that you are to David, and my sympathies to your whole family. It's hard, it happens, but the fact that we know it's coming doesn't make it any easier. So my sympathies to you. William Shakespeare, Sonnet 60. Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end. Each changing place with that which goes before, in sequent toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith, being crowned, crooked eclipses 'gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet, to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth, despite his cruel hand.
Thank you so much, Peggy. It's such a wonderful sonnet and a great way to remember David, whom we miss so much. We're going to move on now to people in time, but not leaving spring entirely behind. Our next reader is Richard Vernon, who's going to read a poem by William Wordsworth, What Man Has Made of Man.
This poem appeared in a collection published by Wordsworth in 1802. The principal object of the collection was to portray situations from common life and to relate them in easily understood language. In this poem, the unnamed narrator relaxes beneath a tree in the wilderness and thinks about the recent societal changes. The beauty around him is in contrast to the miseries humans suffer. At that time, the French Revolution was raging, and in Britain, observers were stunned by the cruelty of French society. Wordsworth and other romantics wrote primarily to try and take back the world from the brink. 2 centuries later, I read Wordsworth's lines with much thought and feeling. It's evident that Wordsworth was thrilled by nature and the wondrous habitat offered by our planet, yet deeply disappointed by the impacts of our species on it. I share that pessimism, but from a different perspective, the damage deriving from our large and growing numbers, currently approaching 8 billion on a planet estimated by scientists to be able to sustainably support less than half that number. Many individuals and some organizations have drawn attention to this threat to our following generations, yet we are still adding 80 million more souls every year, 227,000 more people to feed and house and so forth daily. I'll read just 2 observations before reading Wordsworth's short poem. Sir David Attenborough, Fellow of the Royal Society. The human population can no longer be allowed to grow in the same old, uncontrolled way. If we do not take charge of our population size, nature will do so for us. From Maurice Strong, former UN Under-Secretary General. Either we reduce the world's population voluntarily, or nature will do this for us, but brutally. They both said more or less the same things before pandemics reared their ugly heads. Back to the poem I want to read. It's a short one, just 6 verses. A title given to it by several is "And Much It Grieved My Heart to Think What Man Has Made of Man," written in 1798. I heard 1,000 blended notes while in a grove I sat reclined, in that sweet mood when pleasant thoughts bring sad thoughts to the mind. To her fair works did nature link the human soul that through me ran, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man. Through primrose tufts in that green bower, the periwinkle trailed its wreaths, and 'tis my faith that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. The birds around me hopped and played, their thoughts I cannot measure, but the least motion which they made, it seemed a thrill of pleasure. The budding twigs spread out their fan to catch the breezy air, and I must think, do all I can, that there was pleasure there. If this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. I think that's a great bridge between our theme of spring and where we are now and our move this evening towards looking at people. Thank you. For our next poem, we're going to have a great treat. Edmund Gray is going to read T.S. Eliot, The Love Song of J. Alfred.
Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair, with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? Shall I say I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown.
For our next poem, we're coming back to Peggy Seeger to hear, I think, a really wonderful poem by Carol Ann Duffy, Mrs. Midas. Peggy, over to you.
Hello. It's a strange choice, but as we seem to be ruled these days by the need for power and money, that this poem kind of, it rings a lot of bells with me. First of all, I'd like to apologize to Liz. I didn't know your name was Allison. And so I'm so glad that you're here, Liz. So I got the book, The World's Wives. It's poems by Carol Ann Duffy. And in it, she makes a poem as if she was the wife of this famous person or that famous person, the wife of Icarus, the wife of, oh golly, I forgot. All of a sudden my mind's gone blank. Oh golly, the one that climbed up Notre Dame, what was his name? Come on. The humpback. So anyway, that's, thank you very much. And there's about 2 or 3, I've lost the book somewhere around the house. It's sitting somewhere, God knows where. So I had to bring down the poem from the internet. But some of the poems are absolutely hilarious, where she pretends she's his wife. Now this is called Mrs. Midas, the wife of King Midas, the one who wanted everything that he touched turned to gold. So by Carol Ann Duffy, Mrs. Midas. It was late September. I'd just poured a glass of wine, begun to unwind while the vegetables cooked. The kitchen filled with the smell of itself, relaxed, its steamy breath gently blanching the windows. So I opened one, then with my fingers wiped the other's glass like a brow. He was standing under the pear tree, snapping a twig. Now the garden was long and the visibility poor, the way the dark of the ground seems to drink the light of the sky. But that twig in his hand was gold. And then he plucked a pear from the branch, we grew fondante d'automne, and it sat in his palm like a light bulb. On. I thought to myself, is he putting fairy lights in the tree? He came into the house. The doorknobs gleamed. He drew the blinds. You know my mind. I thought of the field of cloth of gold and of Miss Macready. He sat in that chair like a king on a burnished throne. The look on his face was strange, wild, vain. I said, what in the name of God is going on? He started to laugh. I served up the meal. For starters, corn on the cob. Within seconds, he was spitting out the teeth of the rich. He toyed with his spoon, then mine, then with the knives, the forks. He asked where was the wine. I poured with a shaking hand, a fragrant, bone-dry white from Italy, then watched as he picked up the glass, goblet, golden chalice, and drank. It was then that I started to scream. He sank to his knees. After we'd both calmed down, I finished the wine on my own, hearing him out. I made him sit on the other side of the room and keep his hands to himself. I locked the cat in the cellar. I moved the phone. The toilet I didn't mind. I couldn't believe my ears. Separate beds. In fact, I put a chair against my door, near petrified. He was below, turning the spare room into the tomb of Tutankhamun. You see, we were passionate then, in those halcyon days, unwrapping each other rapidly like presents, like fast food. But now I feared his honey embrace, the kiss that would turn my lips to a work of art. And who, when it comes to the crunch, can live with a heart of gold? That night I dreamt I bore his child, its perfect o'er limbs, its little tongue like a precious latch, its amber eyes holding their pupils like flies. My dream milk burned in my breasts. I woke to the streaming sun. So he had to move out. We'd a caravan in the wilds, in a glade of its own. I drove him up under the cover of dark. He sat in the back. And then I came home, the woman who married the fool who wished for gold. At first I visited, odd times, parking the car a good way off, then walking. You knew you were getting close, golden trout on the grass. One day a hare hung from a larch, a beautiful lemon mistake. And then his footprints, glistening next to the river's path. He was thin, delirious. Hearing, he said, the music of Pan from the woods. Listen. That was the last straw. What gets me now is not the idiocy or greed, but lack of thought from me, pure selfishness. I sold the contents of the house and came down here. I think of him in certain lights, dawn, late afternoon. And once a bowl of apples stopped me dead. I missed most, even now, his hands, his warm hands on my skin, his touch.
Thank you, Peggy. That's such a wonderful poem. Don't marry Midas. You've been warned. Or Icarus. Or Quasimodo.
She rhymes Icarus. It's only 4 lines. I would read it if I had the bloomin' book. Where the heck is it? Where he lands on a hillock. And why did I marry that pillock? Or something like that. It was wonderful.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, we'll save that one for next time. Thank you so much. I'd like to return now to Fran, who has 2 more poems for us from her early life. Over to you, Fran.
Hello again. These 2 poems I wrote in childhood. And it's just dawned on me, or perhaps it hasn't just dawned on me, that you start observing life and people right from an early age. And obviously I must have started doing this subconsciously, because I started writing very, very early. This one, in fact, was done when I was 11. And it's a poem about being at school. I've got the original here, which I wrote, which has been marked by the teacher. I got the rhythm wrong in one place, but I did get a good mark and a tick at the end of it. But things were very formal then, weren't they, in the 50s? And so although I'm writing about a little boy called Tommy Tree, it's sort of half me, really. So anyway, here we go. And this is Tommy Tree, and I shall read it as a little child might read it. Tommy was in the lower third, a good-natured and sprightly boy, but of decimals he'd never heard, and at fractions he was coy. At geography one day in spring, the master asked a quizzer. Poor Tommy answered not a thing, but sucked his sherbet fizzer. The master glared at Tommy then, and one thing was quite plain. Whilst putting down his fountain pen, he reached out for his cane. Poor Tommy, what an awful state. So glad it wasn't me, but I suppose it's just his fate. Poor old Tommy Tree. So that's poor old Tommy, because boys were hit with canes and slippers and all sorts of things then. Anyway, age 15, so we've moved on 4 years, 1959. I don't know what inspired me for this, because I'd never been into a desert or knew anybody who had been, but this poem is called The Nomad. Miles of sand, all parched and dry, bleached white bones and withering shrub. This is desert scenery. Many a nomad here has stood, under canvas here has lain. Crying child disturbs his peace. Restless camel pads the ground, fretting at captivity. Moving caravan of life, hungry youth and feeble age. This is desert poverty. Blistered feet and tangled hair, miles of sky and earth laid bare, existence never free from strife. Still, this is his wilderness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fran, for those two terrific poems. I'm glad you got good marks for Tommy Tree. That's very good to hear.
Yes, I did.
Teachers didn't always appreciate us, but it's very good to have you with us. This is our last poem, and it is about poetry and puddings. And I think if you have a glass of wine and a pudding to hand, you should get on and enjoy it, and listen to David. And at the end, we'll all put our videos and sound back on again, and then people can enjoy talking to each other. First of all, though, David's going to read Feast for the Ears.
Thank you, Susan. Hopefully the internet will carry on working. This poem was passed to me by my friend, Mr. Wyatt. I expect most of you know him. You see him most days wandering grumpily along Church Way, and I expect he's out on the Zoom call there somewhere. So this is Feast for the Ears by Do Be Quiet. I only come for the puddings. Never been fond of verse. Poetry is not my thing. I can't think of anything worse. Poetry is really women's stuff, all arty-farty pretension. Oh, you all like it? fair enough. To upset you's no way my intention. But really, what's the point of art? It's not going to save the planet. Come on, really, hand on heart. It can't save the fields, can it? And you just heard Mrs. She read her own poems, she did. I have standards, so you might not know it. I expect for my normal outlay of £5 blooming quid, verse by a professional poet. But I honour the memory of George Locke, God bless. Susan Walker works jolly hard, and I'm keen not to hurt feelings. Nevertheless, poetry is a total waste of time. I come to Fosham for the gourmet delights. Plum crumble and strawberry fool, always good. Cheesecake slices, shortbread bites, slabs of sticky toffee pud, poire à la Beaujolaise, syllabub, tiramisu. Take more cream, someone says. Try the Eton mess if I were you. Walking past the village shop, I was tempted to pop in and buy a treat. But in the end, I didn't stop. On your own, you don't feel the urge to eat. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. It's solitude, not fun. Just virtual puddings for me, I fear, in 2021. But I'm cheered by the screen when your faces appear, all you lovely bookish nerds. And I'm trying to relish what I hear. And I'll really try to eat my words.
Thank you so much, David, for this great ode to poetry and puddings. I think it's really splendid. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, that's the end of our poetry session, and I hope people will stay a few minutes and have a glass of wine and a pudding and a chat to each other. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you very much for listening. I'm very pleased to see you have a pudding, David.
The one that you made, I think, isn't it?
Oh,
the passion
right.
fruit.
Yes, yes. Well, I hope it's all right. Slightly worried now.
I'll tell you.
Good.
Very good.
Thank you,
Very good.
Susan, for putting this on. You've done a lot of good work.
Yeah, well done, Susan.
It's great
Yeah.
poetry, and it's
Brilliant.
It's great fun to do.
Yeah.
What a terrific variety. What a wonderful variety. David, did you write that yourself?
Well, it might have been me.
Come on, David, who's this do bit Wyatt geezer?
Be quiet, yes.
Who is Do Big Wyatt? You?
I think it's that old fellow who staggers past our house every evening, nearly falling into the hedge.
Are you joking or what?
No, well, I don't think it's him, but there is an old
It's not
fellow.
David Wiles doing it, is it?
No.
Falling into your hedge.
There is an old fellow who falls into our hedge most nights.
Oh, right, okay.
And I know who he is, but I wouldn't say so.
She's
Okay.
got a pudding. Look, Susan has a pudding.
I have pudding.
You have a little pudding.
Yes, yes. And I have a glass of wine. Here's to everyone.
Let's hope next year we can all meet.
We can all be back in the church hall.
Yes, although this has been great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
I was walking down on the canal with Helen Potts today, and it's amazing how quickly we're learning to recognize each other by our eyes, because our hair no longer looks the same, and this is all covered up.
That's true.
Yeah. So we're learning to smile with our eyes. It's really quite wonderful. Yeah.
Here's pudding.
Ooh. I'm out of step here. I didn't have any pudding.
I've got a piece of cake you can have.
Oh, thanks, Fran. Thanks.
Yeah, I have an ale cake I made. An ale cake with beer in it.
That's fantastic. Is
Well,
it damp?
It didn't turn out as well as I'd hoped. It's a bit too dry, but never mind.
That last one you sent over to me was wonderful. Absolutely gorgeous slice.
I forgot what that was.
It was a coconut. Had some coconut.
Oh, that coconut thing, yeah. Yeah, well, I have to do different cakes because I get bored doing the same one. So you never know what will happen next time. You can have a go at this ale cake. It's got cherries and bits and bobs, you know, mixed fruit in it.
Well, soak it in Grand Marnier. That'll do it.
Well,
poems in the poetry and puddings in the shop. Shops featuring puddings all week.
Oh, right.
So if you didn't, if you don't have one this evening, it's not too late.
You can have 2 tomorrow.
You can do.
I think so.
I'm being a rebel and am now having my chicken and celeriac and snow peas.
That's a pudding.
Yeah. In a marinated with coriander and things.
That sounds great. I like the sound of that.
And it beats the sugar bug. You don't have to have sugar in it.
Oh, I'll have pudding later. I'm just not.
You know, there's a community in America called the Shakers. Very fundamentalist. They don't.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're celibate, so there's only about 12 of them left, I think. But my mother used to play some of the folk music on records and it was collected. Oh, it's a long story. But when you turned up at a Shaker household, you would get this piece of music. Welcome here, all be alive and be of good cheer. Welcome here, all be alive and be of good cheer. I've got a pie all baked complete, a pudding too, so very sweet.
Oh my goodness.
All baked complete, a pudding too, that's very sweet. And everybody would sing, welcome here, welcome here. Nice, isn't it?
Gosh, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And then they'd all fight for the one chair that was hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
But they were very principled. They were very principled. They were like the Amish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that. But do you think the Shakers had any connection with the Quakers over here? Quaking and shaking?
No.
Quakers
are not celibate in no way. No.
Oh, celibate. Sorry, I didn't hear you say that.
All those dirty poems you write, Fran. No, you probably celibate doesn't fit into your category.
Oh, honestly,
I love your
Right.
psychological poems. I really do. I love them. I think they're wonderful.
I know you are very kind to me. You are really.
No,
I have got some that would really make you cringe. I can't tell. No way could I broadcast those in Italy.
Oh, you can broadcast them at my house.
Oh, down in Meadow Lane you can.
Yeah.
Villiers Lane you can.
Oh dear.
The Shakers make wonderful furniture.
Yeah, they do.
And rugs and all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
We used to buy them at Crompton Amish Market in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Was the furniture a bit shaky to sit on?
Yeah.
We went for chests, but we sat on them okay.
Edmund, you have to unmute yourself. You're speaking, but we can't hear you. Bottom left of your screen, there's a thing that looks like an egg cup with a red line across. Click on it.
There, it's been clicked for me. I was wondering in what way the Shakers differed from the Quakers. Obviously, they didn't go into banking.
Or chocolate making.
Yes.
No.
The Shakers, they vowed never to marry. They didn't. They only had people who entered the community. They, as celibate, they never increased among themselves.
Oh, right.
There are still communities of Shakers, and they live. I visited one of their community houses back in 1958 somewhere, and it was an enormous barn-like building, and they all had, each of them had their own little cubicle. It was like a monastery or nunnery, and they ate communally. Everything was shared. Everything was shared, and they tilled the soil. They prayed. You can look them up on the web. SHH.
Yeah.
And they believed that by dancing and shaking, that they shake quicker life, shake it, come, shake your life, come life eternal, shake out of me all that is carnal. That was one.
Gosh.
Yes.
I just checked them on the internet, and the Smithsonian Magazine reports that the death of a Shaker leaves only 2 left alive.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
I think they were both in their 80s.
Thank you.
Wow.
I know nothing about them. I just know a few of their songs, you know.
Well, you asked questions like that. There is actually a relationship in terms of the quaking and the shaking were both manifestations of kind of power of the spirit. It also relates to the current, Pentecostal movement. I mean, that's the only connection, is that they both movements had this sort of in the worship, you got taken over by the spirit and had this shaking or quaking. I mean, the Quakers stopped doing it a long time ago. I mean, we now know the Quakers, their meetings, you sit in silence and unless somebody's been inspired by the spirit to say something.
Yeah.
I did go to a long time ago. I had relatives who lived just outside Boston, and once visiting them, they took me to a Shaker community somewhere in Massachusetts. I can't now remember where it was. That was the first time I'd ever come across them.
Well, maybe the shaking is something like some of the modern dancing that the young people do, which is so formless, a lot of it, and it's so individual, where you set the music and everybody kind of dances on their own and just does what they want. Maybe it's something that we need. I don't know.
Yeah, what would the Shakers have made of shake, rattle and roll? And
Well, perhaps when we're allowed to get back together in the hall, we can all start shaking. You can see who's the best shaker. We have a cup for a winner of the best shaker.
Yeah. Be funny if your name was Salt or Pepper, wouldn't it?
Maybe Peggy could sing us "You've a whole lot of shaking going on."
Yeah, that's right.
Do I have a what?
Whole lot of shaking going on.
Whole lot of shaking going on. It was a 60s pop song.
No, I don't know.
Rock song.
No,
is there anyone with the surname Stevens? You got it? Shaking Stevens?
Oh no. Oh, man, that's too much.
Sorry.
Oh, Peggy. I'm Peggy Special Thanks.
Hello, Liz. Hello.
I enjoyed all that very, very much, and thank you.
Of course.
Oh, Liz, Alice and Julia.
Hello,
Liz.
Alice and Julia.
Yes. I'm going to go and enjoy some of your.
I apologize, Liz, when you came to the door. I didn't recognize you with your mask on, and I was in the middle of a phone call, and I think I was a bit rude, so I'm apologizing for that.
Not at all. I think I just surprised you. And you were very kind. I'm ready.
Right, I must go and join the old man now. Otherwise-
I think I will abscond too. I need to go and practice.
Thank you very much, Peggy.
Susan, thank you for arranging it. It's
Thank
wonderful.
you. Thank you, Susan. We'll be in touch.
Yes, thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Good.
Pleasure. Thanks for reading, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Bye,
Well done,
Susan.
Susan.
Bye, John. Bye,
Love
John.
you,
You're
Esther.
there.
Bye.
Bye
Good
all.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
If I'm
Bye.
You're still there. Okay, we're going to leave. Yeah.
Yes, John Wilkes.
Yes, John is here.
Yes, yes. In the corner of the room. Yes.
You're not in the corner.
No.
You're in the corner of the
No,
picture.
no, yes.
I'll turn it round. There you are.
Yes. Well, it's been a wonderful evening. Every time I walk up and down the street of Iffley, I am simply amazed at the amount of heaving talent that is all in all these houses surrounding. And it's a very, very, very wonderful feeling that people are there thinking about poems, writing poems, and also thinking positive thoughts about so many things. It's a great pleasure. I think Susan did quite well also. Yes.